Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Omnichannel Marketer. This is your host, Kate Stevens. Today, I'm excited to have Amy Gordinier, the founder of Skinfix, on the podcast. Amy, it's so nice to meet you.
It's great to meet you too, Kate. Thanks so much for having me.
Amy, why don't we start with a little bit about your background and what brought you to founding this brand?
Yeah, I feel like I've lived my whole life in beauty. So when I was young, my father ran manufacturing for Estee Lauder back in the 70s. We lived in Long Island, close to the Melville factory, and then we moved to LA because he took a job with Max Factor, which is for those who don't know, Max Factor was the first makeup artist brand built back in the 60s and 70s. So when I graduated from university, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to work in beauty. And I ended up going to New York and landing a job with L'Oreal that was really an MBA level job at the time. Incredibly lucky to start in the marketing team at L'Oreal in their mass market cosmetics division. Then went off to business school, came back to New York and worked for Coty. I was a former L'Oreal exec that was running a division of Coty, launching a brand for Isabella Rossellini. So I got to learn how to build a business from the ground up, and then moved back to Europe and did a startup with a colleague from business school, and then ended up moving into a position with Lauder in the UK. I ran marketing for Jo Malone in the UK for 5 years when Jo was still very much part of her business. And Lauder had just bought the company. They were in the earn-out phase. So I learned a lot about what that looks like to be bought by a strategic and do the integration. So yeah, I've lived my whole career in beauty. And when I was with Jo is actually an esthetician by training. She used to be the esthetician for Lady Diana, Princess Diana, and Elton John, and a lot of famous people. And her fragrance business was sort of an offshoot of giving a Christmas gift one year that kind of took off. So I learned a lot about skincare from Jo. We opened aesthetic studios in the back of her stores. And when I got pregnant with my first baby 21 years ago, I was going to move to Canada with my husband. And Jo said to me, I think you'll start your own business someday. So skincare has always been a passion of mine. I loved working on skincare with Jo. So when I moved to Nova Scotia, I kind of had that in the back of my mind, and eventually met a woman that had an incredible formula that her family had created in the 1870s in England before they emigrated to Canada. And I loved everything about this formula. And I decided to buy the business and do it myself and create Skinfix. So that's the short version of how I ended up here.
Amazing. Well, tell me more about the brand and how it started and where it's kind of transitioned to.
Yeah. So the original founding family, their great-great-grandfather had created this healing ointment in the UK. He was a pharmacist, so he had compounded an ointment to help treat skin issues. So inflammation, dermatitis, rash, bug bites. It was sort of this do everything miracle balm. And the family had moved to Canada in the early 1900s, and they continued to make and sell this balm. They had a family pharmacy for a number of years called Dixon's. Their last name was Dixon. And then the family just continued to make it and sell it privately. And it had a lot of lore here in Nova Scotia. It was a bit of a viral product here. So anytime someone had a baby, it was recommended for diaper rash. If someone had eczema, it was recommended. So I was introduced to the founder and I saw the formula, and I was really compelled because it had so many active ingredients at their active levels. It actually had 4 FDA monographed active ingredients in it. And coming from the beauty industry, that was just unheard of. We typically will sprinkle something in and it becomes a marketing ingredient. We build a story around it. This thing was loaded with actives. But really what compelled me was the family had collected letters over the decades that they had been selling this privately from people that had used it to treat diabetic foot ulcers, dermatitis, psoriasis, lichen sclerosis, all these really difficult concerns. And this product from 1870 had worked when nothing else had, and had transformed their lives, given them their quality of life back, allowed their child to play in the sandbox again, just really changed the way people felt and very much impacted their emotional wellness as well. So I thought to myself, I love beauty. I love skincare. I'd love to leverage all the experience that I've had over the last 2 decades working in beauty. But I really love this idea that we can help heal people's skin, that this product is changing people's lives. It's not just a marketing story. It truly is a formula story. So I raised money from friends and family and bought the business from the original founder, and then took it to a dermatologist in Toronto and said, would you recommend this to your patients? And from there, decided to really position it to treat eczema and did a whole branding exercise and launched at retail.
And so talk to me a little bit about launching at retail. So, and then just kind of backing up. So you bought the brand and then launched retail.
Yeah.
How did you think about channel strategy and kind of timing there?
Yeah, the original founder actually had a couple of SKUs here in Canada at Shoppers Drug Mart. So it was already in drug distribution. And because I was targeting eczema at the time, this is 10 plus years ago, mass distribution made the most sense. That was where clients were predominantly shopping for topicals for eczema. So as much as I love Sephora and I'm more of a prestige marketer, mass seemed to make the most sense for this product. So we were planning to sort of relaunch with Shoppers Drug Mart and expand the business with them before thinking about going to the US. And I was at a Women's Wear Daily conference in Miami, and I ended up in an elevator with Christina Hennington, who at the time was running beauty for Target. And she looked at my name tag. She's a really nice person. And she said, oh, Skinfix, what's that? I've never heard of you. And I told her what we were about, that we were a clean brand that was derm recommended topicals to treat eczema. And she said, oh my God, I want you to come to Minneapolis and meet our buyers. We are having tremendous success with derm skincare and we'd love to talk to you. So I ended up going to Minneapolis, presenting the brand to Target, and they decided to launch us full distribution out of the gate 6 months later. So we ended up launching Target a lot sooner than I think we had anticipated. And because of my background, I'd had a little bit experience in D2C. I'd built some websites at L'Oreal and at Jo Malone, but that was not really my expertise. So retail just felt more comfortable for me at the time. And so we started with retail first.
And, as you expanded into retail, obviously, Target's a huge account. What worked there? How did you support your retail partners, and how did that really evolve over time?
Yeah, I mean, Target is unique and amongst mass retailers, as I'm sure you know, and they're similar to Sephora in this way. They really know how to build brands and nurture brands, and they understand and embrace indie brands and exclusives, and they know that they need to really lean in to help build a brand, especially in our case. Target at the time had a natural set where they sold all the natural products, and they decided that we would be the first natural brand that would be sold in a conventional planogram. So they wanted to put us in the derm, skincare, body care category next to CeraVe, Aveeno, and Lactin, etc. So that was a big deal. We also then had much higher turns expectations per week because the natural set, just turns expectations were a lot lower. So they really leaned in and gave us a lot of off-shelf exposures and, did what they could to really help build momentum for the business. We also really leaned in with an external spend. At the time, influencers didn't exist. Instagram didn't exist. TikTok didn't exist. It was Facebook, and there wasn't video content on Facebook at the time. So we had to pull all the traditional channel levers. So we tried everything. We did a lot of in-store off-shelf, and we did actually, believe it or not, some print advertising. We did some point of care advertising with derms. We pulled every lever that Target had available to us from a retail marketing perspective, and we spent a good amount of money. Today would be a different story. Target was still learning how to build an indie beauty brand. They had done it in food, and they were learning how to do it in beauty. So we were learning with them. I think if we were to launch today, it would be a whole different animal. We'd be able to scale it much faster on a much smaller investment. But at the time, we had to really invest. It was incredibly successful. We were the number 3 brand in the derm skincare set in the first year of our launch. I think what happened, though, is that we weren't able to really sustain our spend, and Target didn't necessarily sustain their support at the level that I think that they would today. I think now they understand it's a few years that they've got to really lean into an indie brand. So I think when we ended up exiting Target a few years later to go to Sephora, they said, we should have leaned in more than we did. And so it was a key learning, I think, for them as well. We were one of the first indie skincare brands that they really partnered with to build. So a lot of learnings, a lot of things we would do differently today. But ultimately, we had a very successful business with Target. We just saw an opportunity to scale our business faster with a partner like Sephora when the timing made sense to do that.
So talk to me about scaling with Sephora and, how did that, if at all, need to change the way that you thought about the brand, the positioning, and, the marketing?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of Sephora is that you have actual in-store support. You have beauty advisors who can help tell your story, who can help, explain the product. There are a lot more levers to use with Sephora. They have a obviously platform of 30 plus million engaged consumers that you can speak to through their channels. They have a lot of off shelf and their whole business is indie brands and exclusives. So we just felt we had actually, while we were at Target, we had launched at QVC, and we found that when we could actually tell the story of the brand and show our clinicals and really tell this very robust story of being clean, derm developed, clinical, we did really well. And we were a very expensive product for Target. I think nowadays you're used to seeing more expensive products in skincare at Target, but at the time you were not. So we saw this opportunity to really pivot to Sephora and help us tell our story and build the brand. And they had success in clean with Drunk Elephant, and they were really seeing an opportunity to go deeper into clinical and even into therapeutics. And we had built a facial skincare line at that point that was focused on barrier health. They saw a real opportunity there. That was a category that didn't exist at Sephora at the time. And they're very much visionary. So they saw an opportunity to really build something incremental and bring something differentiated to Sephora. So it was an incredible partnership out of the gate. They know how to do this. They know how to build indie brands. They know how to partner. They know what support they need to give you to get you kind of up and running. They expect a lot from the brand as well to help scale, but it's just an incredible partnership. And it was exactly what we needed. And the timing was right. The timing was right for a brand like ours to make that shift. We repackaged, we kind of evolved the branding from en masse, we were trying to be as loud as possible with our colors, and we had sort of a silver laminate package because we were a small brand with limited resources and we needed to kind of beam off of shelf. Sephora, we started to refine our look, changed our logo a little bit, but we still wanted to be recognizable to the client because Sephora had success with Laneige, which had come from Target and moved into Sephora. They had also had success with The Ordinary that had been at drug distribution and moved into Sephora. So they knew there was still equity in that client recognizing the brand, but we wanted to refine it to look more prestige and more upscale. So we worked on that with them. And again, it was the right move to make at the time.
So what year was this?
This was 2019.
2019.
April of 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
So pre-COVID still.
Yes.
Talk to me about, when you're launching in Sephora, what you as the brand needed to do. What were some of those requirements as it relates to how you can work with Sephora?
I mean, it was, the social media influencer ecosystem was starting to build at that point. It was still actually very much beauty, makeup influencers and lifestyle influencers. It was really before the skin influencer existed. So there was an expectation to work with influencers to obviously get people to post and talk about the product, but it was still very nascent for skincare. It was before dermatologists took to the airwaves. It was really a very different game then, but there was an expectation that we really played in the influencer space. And there was an expectation that we did some digital advertising to drive to Sephora.com and to drive in store. And there was definitely an expectation that as a founder, I was in the field training the BAs and doing a lot of digital online training of the BAs, which is amazing. It's wonderful how much access Sephora gives you to their in-store people. And they have an incredible network of ways to train those folks. And we leveraged all of that. And we also leveraged some sampling to try to sort of get people to try the product. And so they have their 100-point sampling programs, et cetera, in store. So the expectation is that we invested in all of the things that we could do to drive awareness of the brand and drive the traffic to Sephora.
Makes complete sense. Now, fast forward, what does the brand look like today from a channel and channel strategy perspective, and how have things evolved?
Yeah, I mean, if you're successful at Sephora, and not every brand is, but if you are able to scale at Sephora, you can scale very quickly. And as an exclusive business, you get a lot of support in doing so. So
what do you mean by exclusive business, just to clarify?
So We only sell at retail with Sephora in North America. Actually, globally, we don't sell with any other retailer, bricks and mortar retailer. Now, we did launch Amazon this year. We were excluded from doing so until we were a certain scale with Sephora, and we launched Amazon this year. But prior to Amazon, we were Skinfix.com, Sephora.com, and bricks and mortar. And so we are still exclusive with Sephora. And scaling beautifully with them. And so that is sort of the plan for the immediate future, is to stay in partnership with Sephora. So that
does Sephora
makes our strategy.
Does Sephora give you additional benefits for being exclusive?
Yes, I would say tremendously so. Yeah.
What is that?
In terms of off-shelf exposure, a lot of off-shelf exposure. So often if you'll walk into a store and you'll see brands that are on the displays right at the front of store, in the windows, for the most part, those are exclusive businesses. Once you've gone to other retailers, unless you're just, still a top 3 skincare brand with them, you're probably losing access to those exposures, and those exposures are incredibly valuable. The shopper really shops off these fixtures, and it's also it's a credibility. It's a creative to your credibility that Sephora has put you on an off shelf and is presenting you as a brand that they support and that they watch and that they believe is viral and relevant and trendy and all the things. So all of those off shelf exposures, the exclusive brands are prioritized. So it's incredibly helpful. They also give us a lot of their time. I think someone on my team is in touch with somebody at Sephora daily. And I can say from working with other retailers that is the case anywhere that I've ever been. They give you a lot of their time. They give you a lot of their knowledge. They give you a lot of their expertise. They're in the kitchen with us on product development and packaging and marketing and branding. And they're vested in our success because their whole model is built on exclusive brands. So, I highly recommend, if anyone has a brand that would make sense in a Sephora environment, that they are an incredible partner. Ulta are a great partner too, but I think they're sort of they're not as much of a brand builder necessarily as a Sephora. Sephora just really knows how to get brands off the ground and scale them.
What do you think are, reflecting on what worked for Skinfix, what do you think are the qualities that made your brand a good brand for Sephora, and then, other brands that are thinking about Sephora as a channel?
I think first and foremost, we were differentiated. We brought something new and different. And I think that's a huge challenge. There's so much same out there. There's a lot of people that want to launch a skincare brand or a color brand because they want to sell it to strategic and make money. And there are very low barriers to entry in beauty, like extremely low. I could go to a contract manufacturer tomorrow and pick formulas off the shelf and launch in 3 months with a couple $100,000. There's a lot of that goes on in beauty. So I think for us, we were very differentiated we were one of the first brands to really be clean, but we were the first brand to be clean, derm developed, clinical. A lot of brands that say they're clinical, but it's more of a buzzword than an actual reality. We've been working with dermatologists for a decade. We have a scientific advisory board of derms. We've developed products. So our eczema line was developed with the chairman of the National Eczema Association, who's the foremost expert on eczema in North America. We have peer-reviewed published studies. Like, we're a legit derm brand, and we're sold in derm offices. I didn't mention, we are in limited distribution in dermatologist offices as well. And Sephora loved the fact that we were really the first brand that was sold in derm offices and also sold in Sephora. And so we brought that level of differentiation, really robust clinicals, really robust before and afters. And we also talked a lot about skin barrier health, which was a completely new concept at Prestige. CeraVe had really built that business and that category at mass, and no one had been talking about skin barrier health at Sephora. So that was new, and that was different, that was cutting edge, that was innovative, and we were the first brand bringing that to Sephora. And now it's the hottest category of skincare at Sephora, and everyone's talking about barrier health, including color cosmetics brands. But I think it's really important, first and foremost, that you're differentiated, that you have something new and different to bring to the Sephora client that's not just an iteration of what's already happening. And also, we're not a trend brand. Trend works really well at Sephora for sure, but we're one of those ride or die brands. We have the highest level of loyalty and repurchase of any skincare brand at Sephora.
Wow.
We have a really high level of repurchase. We are a product first brand. And so we're not always the sexiest brand. We're not always the hottest brand, but we are the brand that, people, they'll always have one or two Skinfix products in their line, particularly in their assortment, particularly if they have sensitive skin or they have a skin concern. We're kind of that ride or die. And so I think it's important at Sephora, they call their client sometimes a grasshopper. She likes to jump around. I'm one of those clients. I love to try new things. They love brands that are sticky, that people come back to, that people, aren't going to have skin reactions to. The Sephora BNA loves to sell our brand because they know their client will be mostly satisfied, not return it, probably come back and repurchase it. That's really, really important to Sephora. So I think when you're thinking about a business for Sephora, you have to kind of understand who you are. Not everybody will be us. Not everybody will be that sort of, clinical, performance-based, product-first brand. Maybe you'll be a trend brand, but then understand what you are and how you're different and how you're going to scale that business for the long haul so that you're not just a flash in the pan.
Very interesting. What has Sephora, you've been in Sephora now for, I guess, 5 years. So what has evolved at Sephora as it relates to tools or support or training that has really worked for your brand?
I'm not sure anything has really evolved. I think, during COVID, there were a lot of opportunities to do a lot of online trainings with the BAs, which was great because I think once bricks and mortar opened, the BAs were just really ready to go and well trained. I think like everyone, Sephora's social has evolved, their content has evolved, and we've been able to benefit from participating in that and reaching their incredibly loyal, incredibly engaged community with content. They've created the Sephora Squad. I guess they have evolved. They've created the Sephora Squad of influencers, which I think they're in their 4th or 5th year with the Sephora Squad. That's an incredibly powerful tool to leverage as an exclusive brand and be able to get sort of their squad of influencers talking about the business. They've derived a lot more connectivity with the dermatologist space, and I think that's we really started that. When COVID hit and dermatologists weren't seeing patients and they started talking about brands on social and started building themselves as influencers, Skinfix was mentioned constantly because we were already known and loved in the derm community and respected. And that really catapulted our business. And Sephora has really now leverage dermatologists as influencers. They've brought in some more clinical brands. They're really, really seeing growth in clinical skincare, and we're very much part of that. So I think that all of that has really helped us. When we launched, we were a really new concept, and now we are very much at the epicenter of what's happening in skincare at Sephora.
Amazing. We are going to transition now into our topical focus. What is something that you feel boldly or passionately about?
I am very, very passionate about how products are formulated. A lot of times people will say, well, what can a topical product really do? Well, if it's formulated with functional ingredients at functional levels, it can do a lot. It can change the physiology of your skin. It can do a lot. It is a drug. I hope no one from the FDA is listening, but you truly can change skin with a topical product. And sure, also diet and exercise and reducing stress and ingestibles and in some cases prescriptions, depending on the concern. But we truly can do a lot through our skin. And I think historically, the skincare industry has just been a lot of smoke and mirrors. There have been a lot of brands that use marketing levels and they still exist. A lot of brands that will say they have X ingredient, but it's not at a functional level. If it's not at a functional level, it is not doing anything to the skin. And we use a lot of ingredients at functional levels. So we don't even just pick one or even 3. On a Sephora P page, we can only talk about 3 ingredients. We usually have 10 that are at functional levels. So I'm very, very, very passionate about formula first and formulas that truly work. And I think that's why we have such a high rate of loyalty and purchase. People don't even know necessarily why it's working so well, but they know it's really working. And it's a passion of mine and something we really want to better communicate to the client. So I don't know that people really know that about Skinfix. We build all of our formulas from the bottom up. We do not buy formulas off shelf from CMs ever. We have never done it. We start with a blank piece of paper. We talk to the experts in dermatology, functional medicine, and we build the formula from the ground up, and we create every formula bespoke. And nobody else does that I know of. So I'm very passionate about that, as you can tell.
Yeah, I love it. It's important. I do think that there is that like education barrier, or I'm sure that it is something that your brand thinks a lot about, is like how to educate the consumer on what that really means to them. So, okay, now our lightning round. So just your quick favorites. Favorite omni-channel brand?
I love a brand called The Seven Virtues. It's a fragrance brand exclusive at Sephora. It's a brand that's from Nova Scotia, and the founder is one of my best friends, but she's created an in-store freestanding retail experience with her perfume atelier that is completely differentiated from what you can find at Sephora or online, where you actually mix your own juice with her various juices. And so I love when there's an omni-channel experience that adds value, that gives you something that you cannot get from shopping at Sephora or from shopping online, but it's still accretive to the whole experience, and it still builds awareness for the brand, and it's creative, and it's personalized, and it's high touch, and I think she's done a genius job of it, and I would love to figure out how to recreate that in skincare.
What do you wish you could change about our industry?
Gender equality, gender parity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's beauty. It's like female dominated, and yet there is still a lot of inequity in pay, in power. It's a thorn.
We could do a whole nother podcast on that topic.
Yeah.
Favorite podcast?
Pulling the Thread by Elise Lunan. I love. She's on our board. She's the former head of content for Goop. I love her podcast. It's very spiritual, philosophical, political, it's kind of everything. And I think she does a genius job of it.
Favorite newsletter?
I love Substack. I'm obsessed with Substack, but obviously we just come out of an election. I've been sort of down a rabbit hole with some of the political ones. I love Van Jones. He's a political Substack writer and journalist, and I love reading his stuff. I love his perspective.
Favorite social media channel?
I'm going to say Substack. I don't know if it counts, but I'm obsessed.
Sure.
I love it.
Great. Favorite book?
You Were Born for This by Chani Nicholas. She's an astrologer. I'm very, very into astrology. I was a religion major in undergraduate. I'm very interested in spiritual systems, and I love astrology. I've studied it for decades. She's an astrologer. She's actually Canadian, but she's based in LA. She wrote a phenomenal book if you want to sort of understand astrology and see your chart in depth.
Oh, very interesting. And any events that you're planning on going to next year that you're excited about?
You know, I love all the beauty industry events. I think all the beauty journals do a phenomenal job. Beauty Independent, Beauty Matter, Business of Fashion, Women's Wear Daily. I love their events. They're really Beauty Connect. They're really robust. They're a great way to connect. My favorite is Women's Wear, just because I know everyone comes, and it's a great way to connect with all of the folks in beauty who I don't get to see on a regular basis because I live up in Canada. So I love the Women's Wear Daily Beauty CEO Summit. But I love all the beauty industry events. I think they're great.
Perfect. Well, Amy, where can our listeners connect with you?
On Instagram, Amy E. Gordinier, on LinkedIn. Those are sort of my primary channels, but or through our brand, Skinfix Inc. on Instagram, you can DM, and I'm heavily involved in community management as well. So happy to chat.
Amazing. Well, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your learnings. Really enjoyed this. Have a great one.
Thank you, Kate. You too. Take care.
If you liked this podcast, follow me and the Bridge page on LinkedIn and Twitter for hot takes and tactical advice. If you really loved today's episode, we'd love a review on the podcasting platform of your choice, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks for listening.